I go back to the story in the Journal, how Biden's inner circle worked to keep signs of aging under wraps. This is a lot of rear end covering. The president's sign of aging has been obvious for 2 years, which is why I've been referring to him as infirm for 2 years. I do not know if he has Parkinson's, as one would believe. There's evidence that he does. Evidence is not proof. I'd like to make this point. Evidence is not proof. When you heard on Sunday shows, both Kristen Welker and Dana Bash, both of whom with whom I've worked, both of whom are professional, assert that there was no evidence that the Department of Justice had been weaponized, there is a lot of evidence that the Department of Justice has been weaponized. It is not proof that the Department of Justice has been weaponized. Proof requires an adjudication of some sort. It doesn't have to be a jury of 12. There are often adjudications in the United States government that have no juries at all and only an ALJ, and sometimes not even that, administrative law judge, ALJ. The adjudication process isn't going to happen. We're not going to find out. But I'm here to tell you, if Joe Biden does have Parkinson's, he's not qualified to be the president. About 90,000 Americans are diagnosed with Parkinson's every year. It's a pretty terrible disease. It's not ALS. It's not stage 5 cancer, but it's a pretty terrible disease. It's progressive and degenerative. It does not get better. It can be controlled. Many of you will know people. Many of you will have Parkinson's. Lots of people know that Michael J. Fox has had it for decades and continues to raise money and awareness about Parkinson's. There are many things people can do with Parkinson's and do it for a long, long time. I went to Mass for years on Saturday afternoon out in Southern California in front of an older gentleman who had Parkinson's and had the shakes, which is associated with many kinds of Parkinson's. And I always chat with him. How you doing? He said, oh, getting old is not for sissies. Same line every week. Getting old is not for sissies. And he'd get to Mass. He couldn't be a president, though. My next-door neighbor died of Parkinson's. My father-in-law had Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. I know what the progression is like. It is not good. And the president needs to answer the question, have you been diagnosed with Parkinson's? Has anyone said you have Parkinson's? Are you taking medications for Parkinson's? It's not a hard question to answer, but it's out there now, and he needs to answer it. Meanwhile, Wall Street Journal, Biden tries to tamp down Democrats' talk of a new candidate. New York Times, how Biden is leveraging his defiance to try and stem Democratic defections. Then we've got the New York Times, Biden says he is firmly committed to staying in the race. Matt Visor in the Washington Post, Biden is seeing a different world than other Democrats. In the Wall Street Journal again, NATO summit puts Biden's fitness under a microscope. There are many more stories about this, but last night, in sharp contrast to Biden, former President Trump sat down with Sean Hannity. I'm going to play a couple of clips from that. I'm here to tell you, though, my Fox News column this morning is that, simply put, Donald Trump does a lot of interviews. Joe Biden doesn't do any and can't. All right, he didn't do the interview with George Stephanopoulos. He sat there and didn't answer questions. But Trump can and does do many interviews, including last night's with Sean Hannity. Now, let's go and get a couple of clips to compare and contrast, shall we, with, you watched Friday night and you saw last week's debate. Here's Donald Trump with Sean Hannity last night talking about Thursday night's debate last. Cut number 5.
They introduced him and introduced me, and I walked out on his arm, and he looked extremely pale, to put it nicely. And I don't know, maybe it was a good makeup job or maybe it wasn't, but he was a very pale-looking man. And when he started to speak, I don't know, I thought his voice was weak. I didn't know exactly what was happening. It was strange. I do have to say that the CNN, Jake and Dana, were really, they were pretty good. I thought they were fair. I thought they were fair in the questions. I thought to me. But it was a strange evening. I will tell you, it was a strange debate because within a couple of minutes, the answers given by him they didn't make a lot of sense.
That's being charitable, President Trump. He continued with Sean Hannity, cut number 9.
Well, they cover for him, and they still are sort of covering, but now it's getting very difficult to do that. And, it looks to me like he may very well stay in. He's got an ego, and he doesn't want to quit. He doesn't want to do that. It just looks to me like that's what he wants. I think Jill would like to see him stay. She's having a good time. I notice she really seems to be having a good time, and I'm hearing that Hunter is calling the shots. So this isn't necessarily a very positive thing for our country, but I think he, might very well stay in, and if he does, nobody wants to give that up that way. He's going to feel badly about himself for a long time. It's hard to give it up that way, the way where they're trying to force him out. So, I mean, you really have to speak to his doctors, but obviously he's been sheltered by the fake news media. That's why they call it the fake news.
Meanwhile, President Biden took to Morning Joe during my program yesterday, so I didn't know it was happening. Here's an example of what he did, cut number 14.
I'm not letting up, Joe. I am not letting up a little bit. And by the way, France registered, look, you talk about Europe.
That is not coherent. Much of what he had to say on Morning Joe yesterday was not coherent. Jake Tapper actually read out the precise words that the president used, a transcript. It's not coherent. The president is not coherent. Does he have Parkinson's? I don't know, and you don't know. But the cover-up at the White House is as bad as any we have seen in American history.